The final testimony I want you to hear has to do with shaping believers from non-believers. And it's from a couple that I think by their own admission would describe themselves at one point in their lives as either unbelievers or at least indifferent to God. Matt was raised to know the Lord, but he had a bad experience with church, and he turned his back on the church, and even, as he'll tell you, against God for a time in his life. His wife, Abby, describes herself as unsure as to what she thought about God, really. And now I'll let Matt tell you more about that. But when it comes to bad things happening in life, I've heard the arguments that, well, God causes these things to happen for a reason. And maybe there are some things in life that God causes to happen because it serves a purpose. But I don't think everything that's bad in life is caused by God. I think some things in life God allows to happen in this world. We don't always understand the reasons for that either. But then I also think there's a third category of things that happen in life that God didn't cause it, and God really wished it hadn't happened, but it's the result of living in a world that is fallen in sin, and bad things happen. And so it's not one answer that reaches and touches every situation. But whether God causes, allows, or has nothing to do with a tragedy that may have occurred in your life, I do believe this with all my heart. He can bring blessing from brokenness. Do you believe that, church? God can bring blessing from brokenness. Romans 8:28 is a verse that I think is often misunderstood. It says, and we know that God causes everything to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose for them. I think sometimes people read that verse and think, well, every story has a happy ending. Everything, if you just have enough faith, it'll turn out the way you want it to turn out. And that's not what this verse is saying. I believe this verse means that God can use both the good and the bad situations in our life to bring about a greater good. I want you to hear the story of Matt and Abby Olmstead and how God has shaped their lives in the incredible way that he has and brought them to faith. And I can literally watch them growing in their faith, and they still have struggles and ups and downs. And Matt will tell you about a struggle they're having right now that is preventing Abby from being with us today. And our thoughts and prayers are with her. It's a bittersweet story that is rooted in an awful tragedy. But as God frequently does, he brought beauty from the ashes. And so at this time, would you welcome Matt Olmstead as he comes to tell Matt and Abby's story.
Thank you, Greg. Hi, my name is Matt Olmstead, and I've got my little man right here next to me to kind of help me do this. My wife, Abby, and I are kind of new here, about a year and a half. Right now, she is at UK Hospital with our youngest child. She's been there for a couple of days, and will probably be there for a little while more, and she's actually watching, so hi, Abby. And as soon as we're done here, we're going to head back up there. But we did not, I was raised Methodist by my mother and went to Asbury College even. Didn't really have a good experience there, but it was probably more my fault than theirs. And during a low point in my life, I got in with a church that was more cult than church. And it was a cult around the personality of a pastor. And I got really burned. And from that, I walked away. And I didn't just walk away, I walked away mad. I swore off the church, I swore off God. I embraced atheism for a long time from that. My wife, I wish she could tell the story because she can tell it so much better than me, but she was raised Catholic. They would go to Mass on Saturday night so that they could get to dinner on time that evening and have Sundays free for family time. It didn't really mean a lot to her. From an early age, she was terrified of death, unsure of God, unsure of Jesus, unsure of religion, had panic attacks about it even, as a little kid and much into adulthood. In fact, there's times when she would wake me up having night terrors about what comes next. It was absolutely debilitating and terrifying for her. In 2019, we adopted our daughter, Charlie. And then she was the best, most perfect little girl with Down syndrome you'd ever meet. And we loved her dearly. On July 31st, 2022, she died. It was a quick illness. She'd gotten sick. We just thought it was a virus, went to the hospital, and they freaked out because she was septic and she was dying, and they had no idea why. And then the next day, they were going to do a bunch of scans, and they sent me home so that I could get stuff and prepare for a long journey, a long haul at the hospital. So I was almost home back in Harrodsburg, and my wife calls me in tears and tells me she's gone. But from that, she got a miracle. She got to see my daughter's spirit go home. God let her see that. There was a light in the corner of the room. She saw Charlie leave her body, asked for permission to go, and my wife just said, "Go, baby, go." And she saw Jesus take her home, and it was a true miracle. My wife had no reason to make that up. She had no point of reference to draw that from, really. But God knew that she needed that reassurance because of her anxiety. And from that moment, her anxieties about death has been gone. She knows what comes next. For me, thank you. For me, being an atheist, this is interesting. She told me this story, probably wondering how I would take it. And I broke. Because God knew what I needed too. He knew that I needed to hear his love and redemption for his people that he loves from someone that I trust more than anyone else in this world, and that was my wife. And from that day, we both found our faith. So now we were like, what do we do with this last gift from a dying little girl to her parents, the gift of faith? We were like, I don't know. So we started going to my father-in-law's church, which was very similar to the church that I left that hurt me. So much so that it was very uncomfortable. We eventually decided to look elsewhere. And my wife put a little thing on Facebook asking for recommendations in Harrodsburg. And the overwhelming response was Carpenters Christian Church. So on New Year's Day, 2023, my wife and I and my son, we came in the door, and we sat right back there, and it just felt good. And one of the things that I was really involved with at this former church, and pretty much all my life, was music. And it hit me that while stylistically similar to the church that we left, this was different. And I say this, and I don't mean it in a mean way at all, and I mean it more as how awesome God is. But the music wasn't perfect. There were lighting errors, there was wrong notes, and it was wonderfully wonderful because the church that I came from demanded perfection. And it was just so awesome to get a sense of these people are just worshiping, and it was so cool. And that's one of the things that God was also redeemed as well, because when I walked away from church, I walked away from music too, and I hadn't played an instrument or sang or done anything for almost 15 years until about a couple weeks ago when I got invited to be on the team here, and God is redeeming that in me as well. But as much as all of those things are great, Sunday mornings and the Vine in the evening, or the Vine online and the Vineyard in the evening, and being on the music team, all those things are so awesome here. But what is more awesome is that we've been grafted into a body of believers and just accepted for who we are and allowed to flourish. And that is the true miracle that we got from the death of my baby girl. Was that God took it and used it to redeem not just me, not just my wife, But a couple months ago, my son gave his life to Christ, and I was given the privilege of getting to baptize him. And that was honestly the best thing that's ever happened to me. So I just want to say, there was a lot more to this story in the first service, but I think I'll just let it go with that. But we're very grateful for what Jesus is doing here at Carpenters Christian Church. It's not a church that's centered around a personality or anything like that. It's not Greg's church. It's not the elders' church. It's not my church. It's Jesus' church. And we're walking it out like he said to do it. And it's real. Thank you.
And I know today Abby is at the hospital with their precious daughter, and our thoughts and prayers are with her. And, from an eternal, from a purely earthly perspective, factoring Jesus out of that story, that would have seemed like a senseless tragedy, wouldn't it? Such hurt, such heartache. But from an eternal perspective, what if the tragedy that Matt and Abby experienced was the only way their eyes would be open to Jesus? What if that was the only way that they could be where they are today? I've heard Matt and Abby say that in a way Charlie gave them a beautiful gift. And sometimes being on that potter's wheel can be extremely painful. But that's what the Romans 8:28 talks about, that God can use the good, but he can also redeem the awful and put it together and make something good for his purposes and his glory out of that. I'm thankful for the guts it took all of those folks to come up here and share something very personal to them. Would you all help